One of the pieces I think that I can recall was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Hearing it on piano, it's so striking, and there's so much emotion and nuance in it. My father played so much different type of music. He loved classical music and Motown, funk, tons of different things, but his love of classical music, I think, really stuck with me, and specifically with Beethoven Moonlight Sonata. I think as a child, he actually did take piano lessons, but he didn't keep it up as an adult. He also played trombone, I believe, through high school. So I think I got a lot of musical talent from him. My mother also played piano and enjoyed playing hymns just on her own, even into adulthood. But I grew up being a regular at church. Both my parents were very faithful Christians, and also just grew up experiencing music in the church. I was a member of the handbell choir, the choruses, choirs growing up. I even was an accompanist for my youth choir, playing piano. My father was in the United States Army. He was actually stationed in Germany, and I was born in Frankfurt, Germany. And then he got orders back to Fort Knox, Kentucky. That's what brought us to Kentucky, and I moved there when I was about 2. My father retired from the Army when I was about 5, and then we just moved right outside of Fort Knox. I think growing up in the church for me and being so involved with music, that really, I think, from an early age, singing and being inspired by music helped. I remember it was the church organist. I was struck with her and really wanted to take piano lessons, and she was my first piano teacher, and this was probably around 4th grade, I believe. And it wasn't like my parents just bought me a piano, but I really begged and pleaded with them, and I think they knew that music was really my calling, so they worked hard to find a piano that we could afford and that would be a good learning instrument, and eventually got one. I started on piano first in 4th grade, and then also in 4th grade in school in general music, I had the most amazing general music teacher, Mrs. Jones. I still remember her. And growing up in Kentucky, she used native instruments like the dulcimer. So we all played lap dulcimers and did a lot of Orff instruments and other singing things, but I really put some of my current musical endeavors with the seed that she planted early on. Also in 4th grade, we learned recorders. And recorders, I took to them. I always tell the story that I used my allowance to buy the whole family of recorders. So most people play the soprano. I bought the little sopranino at about a tenor. And had I had enough money as a 4th grader, I would have bought a bass as well. But I was a member of a recorder quartet at church.
About Mrs. Jones, what do you remember about her today? Like, what was it about her that got you interested in music?
I think the thing, looking back, actually was just using those indigenous instruments to Kentucky, a dulcimer. And actually in high school, my uncle, who is a carver, a wood carver, he actually helped find and help craft a dulcimer for me, which I still have and I cherish to this day. She also just had so much energy. I remember actually some of the songs that we would sing.
Which?
Froggy went a courtin' and he did right. I think folk tunes. Froggy went a courtin' and he did right. Froggy went a courtin' and he did right. Froggy went a courtin' and he did right. A sword and a pistol by his side. I actually wrote her a letter when I was in college and just thanked her. I didn't know if she would remember me, and her response, I remember, has touched me, and I will remember it forever. She's like, of course I remember you. You had so much in you. I saw so much back then in you. Growing up in a religious household, we weren't allowed to listen to MTV or watch it. But I remember one time we had a babysitter who had it on by mistake, and I was watching some of that, and I think definitely by the time I was in middle school and high school, I was listening to pop music, and I love to this day just basic like top 40s. The first CD I ever purchased, my brother and I, we split the CD, we split the payment. It was Ace of Base. For college, I knew I was going to be a music student. I actually went in as a music education student. I didn't think I was good enough to make it as a performer. So I wanted to go the education route as almost like a safety net. I thought that would be the route I should take. I auditioned at several places, mostly in the Midwest. I took auditions at all of them. And it was actually at Miami University of Ohio. First of all, I just fell in love with the campus. It's gorgeous there. It was the clarinet professor there, Michelle Gingras, who I just really took to from the beginning. I had a lesson with her before. She was so engaged in me. I got such a good energy from her. And I really noticed that I could learn so much from her, so many things that I didn't feel like I had, skills I had up to that point. I really thought that she would add that and elevate my playing and help me. And it was her that she kind of went out of her way to help me get money and funding, and would keep writing me before the decision deadline came to see if I was still interested. And it was that personal contact. I knew that she would be there and take care of me, and to this day she still does. I could call her at any hour after all these years, and she would give advice, she would help me out professionally. So she definitely was a teacher for life. We tore into the repertoire, and I'm glad that I got to learn a lot of the standard pieces in the clarinet repertoire, and continue to work on some of the elements, fundamentals like tonguing, also tone production, and just technique like scales, thirds, arpeggios. So she really, I think, turned my playing around. Standard pieces are the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, Debussy Premier Rhapsody, Saint-Saëns Sonata, the Brahms sonatas. I feel like when one approaches a piece, you have to study it. You have to kind of look through just beyond what's on the page and see what's there. It's also good to know the historical background, the life of the composer, where the composer fits in music history. What are the techniques or the nuances of that time period musically? And something as with Brahms, it's so lyrical, but at the same time, there's so much complexity in the actual composition. So while I might have a line as a clarinetist that's singing and very lyrical, to fit with the piano, you have to really know the entrance and how it will line up and the bigger picture. I think in college, it really showed me that there are so many people just like me that were just as nerdy about music. I said that I've told the story that like my freshman year, I would sit in the dorm room on Friday nights analyzing scores to symphonies. That was fun for me. But I felt a community of people just like me. I think though in college, I also realized this is what I want to do. This is what I need to do. I'm good at this. I'm a good clarinet player. I can go further. So during college, as I said before, I had come in as a music education major. I actually added music performance as well. My teacher and I, we decided that it wasn't that much more to do the double degree, and I could use either one going forward, and it seemed like a good plan. I determined that I need to go on to get a master's and do it in performance. And so my college professor, she blessed that idea, and we looked into different schools to do a master's. I went to Michigan State University and did a master's degree in performance there. Again, learned even more. I feel like the master's program, it's even more concentrated in learning technique, repertoire. My clarinet professor there, Frank L., I really respect him and look up to him. He gave me so much time. Usually you get 1 hour per week as a lesson. I was preparing for auditions after grad school for military bands and symphony orchestras, and I remember he would come in and give me extra time just to hear my excerpts and be an extra set of ears. I was only supposed to do 1 recital for that degree. I ended up doing 2, and again, he would come in for rehearsals and give extra coachings and mentoring, and just I feel like he really just gave me so much of his time that he didn't need to. For auditions, usually orchestras, they will have a list of excerpts. So there might be 12 different excerpts on that list, and those are just usually solos of a big work that are clarinet-centric that you will have to know. So you have to prepare them to the best of your ability, and they might only, at the audition, call for 2 of them, but you don't know which they are, and you have to be prepared for all of them. There's a lot of pressure in taking an audition. I remember my first audition that I ever took. I wasn't really sure of the protocol, of what was going to happen. And I remember that after it was finished, you're on stage by yourself. There's a screen, so nobody knows your identification. So in many ways, it is a little more comforting because you're not put on the spot. There's nobody looking right at you. But I just remember giving a huge sigh of relief when it was over, because all of that practicing, it's over in a blink of an eye. And I've grown from every audition experience I've had, because every audition is different. I learn different things about my preparation and nerves. My advice for taking auditions is just to be the most prepared that you can be before. You need to know the pieces inside and outside. You should be able to play them at any time of day, in any circumstances, because reeds change as a clarinetist, and play in front of people. Even though you play by yourself on the stage, you need to have that idea of having an audience there and people judging you or listening to you. Just try different things. I've even done it where you do jumping jacks or something to get your heart rate up, so you can kind of simulate the nerves going. Try to play in different tempered rooms. Sometimes the rooms are very cold, oftentimes they're very, very warm. But just try to mix up the circumstances, because you never know what they will be, and you have to play at the drop of a hat always. So after grad school, I moved back home my family had moved to the Chicago area, and that's where they remain. So I moved back home, and I was going to take auditions for military bands and symphony orchestras, because I knew I wanted to be a performer at this point. Save some money for these auditions, because they're very expensive to fly to different cities and to take the auditions. I also began really teaching music lessons then too, just to make some more income. So I was teaching piano and clarinet. I really enjoy teaching. I find that even if the student isn't the most adept at the instrument, I always try to find ways to encourage them or meet them where they are, to try to get them interested or try to raise their skill level from where they are. Because in all honesty, in today's day and age, sometimes it's difficult for people, especially children, to be engaged in an instrument or maybe they don't have instant success. So you have to try to always find new ways to really encourage them to stick with it and practice and do more, because the more that you put into the instrument, the better you'll be and the more you'll actually get out of it. I probably took about 8 to 10 auditions before I actually won one, and it ended up being the Air Force Band in Boston, Massachusetts, and that was my first winning audition, and I was ecstatic. And it took a while for me to kind of get processed through the Air Force, but then I eventually went to basic training in San Antonio, Texas in 2005, and started my career in the Air Force Band then. I did 7 years of service in the Air Force Band. Well, basic training is just that. It's very basic, so you have to, it's kind of the great equalizer. I had to do shooting training. We also did, they call it Warrior Week, where you are basically outside in tents and playing war games, if you will. You know, you have to be on guard and run the obstacle course. It was definitely a challenge. It was stressful, but it taught me a lot physically and emotionally that I could get through anything. And, you know, on the other side of this gruesome experience would be a great job playing my instrument that I loved. And it was a great way to serve my country too. My father passed away when I was 17, and we weren't the closest growing up. I think as a teenager, you know, you rebel against your parents or don't always get along with them in the moment. So looking back, I wish that I had had a more solid relationship with my father. But now, looking back at what I've done, our lives really parallel so much, and I know that I'm very much like him, and we have the same values and done a lot of the same things. He was in the military, as was I. He was stationed overseas. I was too, in the same country of Germany. I know my dad would be so proud of me and actually how similar we actually are. My mom passed away in 2008, and it was very difficult for me because I became super close with my mom, especially after my father died. I wanted to kind of step up as the older son and really be there for my mom to help her, and we just got very close, and it was really, really devastating to lose her. I feel very lucky with the parents that I had. They were just great people, great role models. They really instilled great values, I believe, in my brother and I. And they were so supportive, especially of our interests. My brother was really into sports growing up, and me with my music. They never once discouraged me. They always encouraged me, and in different ways too. My dad was a football player growing up, and we shared the same body build, so I feel like he always wanted me to do sports, follow in his footsteps, and I didn't. But little things like high school marching band, he fell in love with that. Our high school marching band was actually very good, so that made it easy. We won a lot of competitions, but he had so much fun and enjoyed going to the football games where he could kind of relive his past watching football, but also watch me playing the halftime show. But that was one way he really connected to me musically. My mom would always be at every concert in the audience. Usually she was grading papers, but she was always very supportive, and they came to everything. So I think some of the clarinets that I really grew up listening to were Carl Leister, who he was the principal clarinetist of the Berlin Philharmonic for over 30 years. I think it also comes from the recordings I had were all of the Berlin Philharmonic, so I kind of idolized his sound, and I felt so fortunate I was given the opportunity to study with him at a music festival in Canada. Just the nuggets of information and knowledge that he gave us was just incredible. One of his ideas or concepts was that there's waves in music, it's like the tides, that there's always movement. And I always try to embody that or show that when I play, that the music is always going somewhere or coming from someplace, that it is never just stagnant. Some of the other clarinetists that I really enjoyed listening to is Sabine Meyer, who's another German clarinetist. Her tone is just to die for. It's so dark and rich, and she's just an excellent technician on the clarinet. Another person who I enjoy listening to is Ricardo Morales, who's the principal clarinetist of the Philadelphia Orchestra. I've also been fortunate enough to play for him a few times, and he's just such a kind person and just a jovial person, and that also I think helps when you see somebody who is so good on their instrument, but they're also just a nice person and just really giving back to the clarinet world in their own way. I definitely think that one's personality comes through when they play music. It's so funny that if you had 5 different people playing the same piece of music, the notes would be the same, but it would sound completely different from person to person. And part of that, I think, is just their personality. There's something deep within us that I think really shines through and comes out as we play. And if we want to get even more, technical, everyone's body is different too. So the mouth cavity is always different, and so the sound sounds a little different as well. I definitely admire Artie Shaw and Benny Goodman and Pete Fountain and these great jazz legends. While I didn't really grow up listening to them, they have given so much to the clarinet world, and I think in their own way, they really made the clarinet kind of mainstream at that point in their life. And it's just incredible that most people actually can relate to Benny Goodman, that's one of the first names they think of when you think of clarinet. Also playing in the Air Force, when there's so many World War II vets and people of a certain age when they come to concerts, that's something that definitely sticks with them, and we played a lot of old jazz tunes that they love. I definitely can look at classical music and find similarities with jazz. I am mostly classically trained, so jazz isn't my first. I'm not super comfortable or knowledgeable in all of jazz, but luckily through my experience in the Air Force Band, I did 1 year of playing in the Dixieland Band, which is actually perfect for me because it's just the old style traditional jazz. There's not crazy chord changes. It was a great way to get my feet wet in the jazz world. And I think it proved to me a few things. It proved to me that I can look at chord changes and I don't freak out. I really got to understand how jazz works and what the language requires one to do when they play jazz. And it definitely helped me with my classical training. I think as a classical musician, people look at jazz and think, oh, it's so free and open, you can do whatever you want, there are no rules. And it's actually not quite true. There are rules that you do have to follow, but it is more forgiving. And actually classical music should be more like that. I think we all look at classical music and think, oh, it has to be in this box, you have to play it perfect, it has to be so precise, which is somewhat true, but there is more freedom than I think we think there is. There's freedom for expression and musicality. So I think one of the performances I saw recently in New York City was the New York Philharmonic, it was a few years ago, play Elgar's Enigma Variations, which is a piece that I love and have performed a few times, and everybody knows the slow middle tune. But there was so much nuance in the performance. There's all these short movements, and everyone just sounded very unique and different, and it really is a testament to the quality of players on the stage. It was as if I hadn't heard it before, because I was hearing new things, different things presented in a new way, and it's just so refreshing. Sometimes I think these big pieces can become they get played in the same manner every single time, and it's so nice to hear something different.
Handel, I shall be sorry if I only entertain them. I wish to make them better.
I think that's very powerful. I totally agree with that sentiment. I think so often that young students especially, or sometimes I get bogged down with just practicing by yourself, and you forget that it's really a team effort. You're performing often with colleagues or a partner, but it's the art form to present to an audience. We all are playing to impress people and impress upon their hearts, their minds, their souls. So it's so powerful that, yeah, we want to make a statement and hopefully move people in such a way.